Thank you all for joining us from so many different places. We have, I think, a very interesting seminar today with four speakers. I will introduce them in a second. I think our theme is, in general, ideas and the importance of ideas from four different perspectives. Let me just say one thing. The most frequently asked question I had following our previous two seminars was the following: is it possible to kill an idea? And the idea behind this question was that Hamas represents an idea. It is not possible to kill ideas, and therefore Israel's war effort is doomed. So let me say just this: that's nonsense. From history, we know that you can kill ideas. It is possible to defeat ideas. Now, obviously, because ideas are something which is abstract, you cannot eliminate them entirely. If something is in some book or another, you'll always find a copy of that book somewhere. So in that sense, yes, Mein Kampf still exists. And yes, there are still people who advance Nazi ideologies, also in Europe and in the United States. But Nazism is no longer a viable, dangerous force in Europe and in America, as it was. And same goes for ISIS, that was described only a decade ago as an organization that will take over the entire Muslim world, or the entire Arab Muslim world. Where is it now? Well, the ideology still exists. If you Google enough, you will find documents pertaining to ISIS, describing ISIS ideology and so forth. But as a force in history, ISIS is very much diminished. So those who say repeatedly that the idea cannot be defeated, and therefore Hamas cannot be defeated, what they're really after is something quite different. They're really after the idea that Israel should be defeated. Now, some of you may be very impressed with a lady like Queen Rania expressing her grief and concern about the loss of Palestinian lives. Well, the truth is, when her father-in-law massacred thousands of Palestinians brutally and begged Israel to save his throne, she could not care less about Palestinian lives. I'm not belittling the tragedy that has now befallen Gaza. I'm just saying a lot of the hypocrites who speak on behalf of the Palestinians do not care one bit about Palestinian lives or about human rights. They're only after one thing: seeing Israel defeated and seeing Western liberalism defeated. Two notions, final notions before we start the workshop. For those of you who ask again, what can we do? I just want to remind you about something that's very important. There is this obsession today with likes and tweets and followers and social media and all this kindergarten that so many people spend so much time in. But in the end, it is politicians who will make the vital decisions. So the most useful thing any of you can do is contact your representative, your congresswoman, congressman, and tell them how you feel about the situation. And the last word is that we hear again and again that certain outrageous statements that we hear from American campuses and other university campuses around the world are protected by the principle of freedom of speech, and in the United States by the First Amendment. I think the point that is very important to have in mind is that the First Amendment works both ways. If a Cornell professor, let's say his name, it's Russell Clifford, am I correct, Carl?
Yes.
That was the name? Okay, if a Cornell professor has the constitutional right to tell the world that is energized and exhilarated by the burning of Jewish babies, then you have the right to tell the Cornell administration and Cornell professors and the private email and the work email and the private address of Russell Clifford, or whatever the name of the deplorable is, what you think about him and what you think about the future of his university if he maintains his job there. By the way, I checked it yesterday. If you visit his website, he's still part of the faculty. Basically, a man who stated that he is so happy with seeing the burning of Jewish babies, is not just happy, is exhilarated and energized, is still a faculty member of supposedly reputable American university. I think part of the soul searching we will have to do in Israel when it is all over, by that I mean Israeli academia, is to ask ourselves, why have we placed so much weight on those universities, those so-called elite American universities, in evaluating ourselves and our works? But I think that goes for the day after. So thanks again that for all of you to have joined us, that you've joined us this evening. And as I said, we have 4 very exciting presentations and speakers. And our first speaker is a young man who has something which I think has nothing to do with age. That's called character. And I think some of you have already heard him speak on British media, but we're very happy and honored to have him with us tonight. Noah Abrams, formerly from the BBC. I say formally because he just resigned from the BBC for reasons which I think he will share with you with much greater articulation than I possibly could. So Noah, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real privilege to be here. And look, you talk about changing ideas or killing ideas. Maybe that's why I left the BBC, to change their ideas. I left the BBC because I'm a man of my morals, because I believe in my morals, because regardless of consequence, I refuse to represent an organization who fail to appropriately inform on the atrocities we all know are taking place. And when you're sitting in London right now, where anti-Semitism is the highest it has been since the 1940s, since post-war records began, where we're taking off our jewelry in fear, where mezuzahs are being ripped off of walls, where our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has had no choice but to approve millions being spent on Jewish security, there was no way I could condone the BBC's behaviour and the way they are representing this conflict. And so, unquestionably, a large chunk of the hate and of that government money being spent, being splashed, is because of the BBC's negligence and the BBC's refusal to use the correct terminology. I'm reading about and seeing the videos we've all seen, the horrors, the nightmares, women being raped, babies being burnt and beheaded, pregnant women being cut open and unborn babies being slaughtered. Truly horrifying stuff. And the BBC standing by as British people rejoice, as people rejoice all around the world by watching what we have seen. The BBC say nothing. They stand quietly. And I don't know if anyone saw the interview with Rachel Riley on Newsnight recently. She's a very eloquently and well put together presenter. However, the BBC presenter on the other end was not. They claimed they hadn't seen these videos. Well, that's either a lie or it's sheer ignorance. It's pure ignorance. It's in the Hamas declaration they want to annihilate the Jewish people. Yet the BBC refused to call them terrorists. And if they had it their way, the BBC would still refer to Hamas as militants. And I'm pleased to say that I would like to think I made a very small change in their change of stance in terminology. But their change in terminology, their current terminology is prescribed terrorists, which I still feel, as most of the Jewish community do, especially here in London, that to still refuse to call them terrorists is a slap in the face. It's a change in stance to try and keep the Jewish community quiet. Well, guess what? When mothers of hostages are coming out with quotes like "I have 4 children," hopefully we won't stay quiet. The BBC will fall on the wrong side of history if they haven't done so already, which I believe they have. And we won't stay quiet. I won't stay quiet. I won't let the hierarchy at the BBC silence my voice. They have blood on their hands. And whether we like it or not, they are the most influential broadcaster on the planet. And when you have that influence, you can influence hate. And that's what they've done, because people believe what they see. That is the power of the media. People believe what they see, what they hear. They trust what they hear and what they see, and rightly so. You should trust your national broadcaster, because that's the power of words and that's the power of terminology. But the BBC haven't only misread the room, I think they failed in their duty of care to a community that already feels abandoned. And I won't switch on the television and go to BBC News, and neither will most of the London Jewish community or the Jewish community in general, because they don't fairly represent us. And to explain this a little further, you can look at the attack in Brussels just days after the October 7th atrocity, the nightmare that we are now all living through. And that attack in Brussels, and no attack should be taken lightly. Every attack is as horrifying as the next. However, they refer to it as a terrorist attack. So why the double standard? Why? I think there's one answer only. I think it's because the BBC are unconsciously, or perhaps just consciously, anti-Semitic. And so that was the real reasoning why I left the BBC, because as a Jewish man, there is no way I could continue to represent them. And sometimes you have to take a step in life. Sometimes you have to be the first domino to fall. I'm pleased to say others have now too. And you have to do what's right. And I don't have any regrets. It was a very, very difficult few weeks. I got a lot of hate online, as I expected, perhaps a little more than I thought. But mostly support from the Jewish community, from people inside the BBC who call me to say, look, we can't do what you've done because we have families to feed, which is understandable, which really is. But thankfully, like you said, I'm a young guy, and I can afford to take a risk. And the risk is that I will never be able to work for the BBC ever again. They are the biggest broadcaster on the planet, perhaps on par with India today. They are huge. And I won't be able to work for them again. However, that doesn't bother me, because I did the right thing, and I hope now I've given the Jewish community their voice, and I will continue to do that for them. And so I'm just trying to do justice for the Jewish community here, for the atrocities committed, not because we need assurance about who these people are, but because the British public do. And that's the other thing. It's not us as Jews who need this reassurance of the word terrorist. We know they're terrorists. We know they're mass murderers. We know they're animals. But the British people do. The common population do. If you aren't informed, like we all are in this room this evening, of what Hamas are, a terrorist organization, if you aren't informed, then you need to be. And that's why the BBC need to change their terminology, because it's important. 7 former culture secretaries in this country, 7, say that the BBC's refusal to call Hamas terrorists outright risks blurring impartiality, BBC impartiality, and that is what they preach. The BBC will tell you that they are impartial. There's the point made by the chief rabbi, who is an excellent speaker and one of the best representatives for the Jewish people in this country and across the world, that by not using the word terrorists in itself violates impartiality. And it does. And this isn't some visceral issue about words being thrown around. This is as serious as it gets. And Tim Davie, who is the Director General of the BBC, is ignoring government advice. He's teetering this precariously on breaking the law in this country, where supporting a terrorist organization is illegal. Now, if you're not condemning a terrorist organization by calling them terrorists, then what are you doing? A question coming in about John Simpson. Well, John Simpson will go all night about impartiality, but the BBC aren't being impartial by taking the stance they're taking. And as for John Simpson himself, an excellent journalist, but unfortunately this time archaic in his approach. And there's this very famous quote where the task of a leader is to get his people from where they are to where they have not been. Now, that's what Tim Davie must do. He needs to take his organization from where they are, and they are in a dangerous place. They are in a really dangerous place, to where they have not been. They need to come out of this the other side. And there's something about the Director General of the BBC being afraid of being hurtful towards Hamas. Well, I don't understand his fear. There is nothing to be fearful of. We are in a country, thankfully, protected by our government. A government who supports the BBC, but is this time condemning them, because our government are advising them to change. Our royal family have changed. Joe Biden, every government of the Western world, or every civilized government, have called Hamas terrorists, which they are. And the BBC, for the most influential broadcaster on the planet, they won't. And they'll preach principles, they'll preach their stance and impartiality, but they won't change. They won't say terrorist because it's a loaded word. Well, the fact is that Hamas are terrorists. If they are so big on preaching the facts, then why aren't they delivering this one? And just to very quickly summarize, words matter, and words shape societies. You know, during my sort of part in this war, I'd like to change that as much as I can, to really highlight the importance of terminology and wording. And you touched on at the start, Jewry, what we can do to change, to make an impact in Israel, in the United Kingdom, in London. And a lot of people have asked me that question. As a broadcaster, I have a platform, and you know what? It's mostly football fans, funnily enough, because my career has been in soccer and football. And people say to me a lot of the time, what can we do? And my response is this: we can be kind. Hamas have taken all of this kindness out of this world. So many people are trying to take kindness out of this world. We can replenish it. That is what we can do as people in London, the United Kingdom, and around the world. We can use the correct terminology, we can educate properly, and we can be kind. So that is why I left the BBC. That is the direction the BBC have taken, and that's their choice. I can only invite them to change, but I certainly won't change my morals or my stance.
Thank you, Nath, for your inspiring words. We will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the workshop, so I hope you can stay with us, because I'm sure there are a few questions for you and probably words of encouragement. But for now, I have only one question for you. Do you know Eretz Nehederet?
Go on, explain.
So it's I'm surprised you haven't watched that yet.
Oh, the video? Yes,
yeah,
I've seen. Yes, yes, of course, of course.
It's a very popular Israeli satirical show. Some people say it's the Israeli Saturday Night Live. I think it's actually much better. So let's just watch 30 seconds that I think you will identify with very much.
Good evening from London. Here are some news from the war in Gaza. Israel has bombed a hospital, killing hundreds of innocent people. More. Much better. With more details, our Middle East correspondent, Harry Whitegilt.
Good evening, Rachel, from the illegal colony of Tel Aviv. Israeli officials has denied bombing the hospital, but we have video footage showing what really happened indeed.
Absolutely shocking, Harry.
Yeah, we got this video from Hamas, the most credible not terrorist organization in the world.
If only it was just funny, yeah.
Well, it's sad how accurate or almost accurate that video is. I think when you're watching the BBC, you can really see exactly that. The fact that they sit and hide behind so many facts, and they really just have such a lack of care towards this whole situation and conflict. It's quite mesmerizing, and it's quite mesmerizing how accurate that video is, how scary it is too.
The accent always does give it a certain authority, doesn't it? We have to give them
Well,
that.
yes, the British accent definitely holds its weight. We all as broadcasters are trained to, I suppose, speak in a certain way when on air, and you figure that out as time goes by. And yes, accents, and the way one holds themselves, it certainly does hold authority. Yeah.
Great. So now our next speaker, as I'm sure you've all seen and heard some very alarming pictures and voices from Istanbul the past 2 days. And if you are in Israel or also outside Israel, and you want to know what's really going on in Turkey, there is one man you always ask, and this is Dr. Eytan Cohen. Very happy that you're with us, Chai.
Thank you very much.
12 minutes are yours.
Thank you very much, Uriah, and thank you very much, Carl, for this kind invitation. I hope you can all hear me. In this 10 minutes, I would like to summarize you the Turkish position in this war. First of all, I would like to divert your attention to the latest statements of the Turkish president. 2 days ago, he delivered a very important speech at the Turkish parliament, and there he tagged Hamas as a freedom fighter organization, and he emphasized and highlighted that this is not a terrorist organization. I just want to remind you that Turkey is a member of NATO and is considered as a inseparable part of the Western Alliance. So this is very much disturbing to see that once again Turkey is adopting a very independent, a very anti-Western attitude. We could assume that he could declare his affinity to the Palestinian cause, to the rights of the Palestinian people. Somehow it is understandable. But when the Turkish president is highlighting his support to a bloody terrorist organization like Hamas, I think this is also creating a very important legitimacy problem also for the Turkish Republic itself. I also would like to mention here that this cooperation between Turkey and Hamas did not start yesterday. For the first time ever, the Hamas Politburo chief Khalid Meshal visited Ankara in 2005, thanks to Ahmet Davutoğlu, who was also the former Turkish prime minister and also foreign minister, and of course he was also an advisor to President Erdogan. So within the years, we began to see the growing cooperation between Hamas and Turkey. And unfortunately, according to the Turkish news outlets, in the recent years, the Turkish government even provided them passports. For instance, Hamas's Ismail Haniya, according to the Turkish media, he has a Turkish passport, and this is very much disturbing. And besides the speech at the parliament, yesterday, Mr. Erdogan, a day before his country's 100th years of the Republic Day, today is the Republic Day in Turkey, and yesterday, a day before, he organized a huge mass rally in Istanbul's former airport called Atatürk Airport. And according to the Turkish media, hundreds of thousands of people came there together with Palestinian and Turkish flags. And there he again insisted, and he again highlighted and emphasized the same stance, the same pro-Hamas stance. And more disturbing than that, he also tagged Israel not as a state, but as an organization. And while he framed his words in the Turkish language, he used the word örgüt. The word örgüt is solely used for the terrorist organizations, despite not tagging Israel as a terrorist organization. But he referred to Israel as an örgüt, as an organization. So many people could see, could understand that instead of Hamas, he was accusing Israel as acting like a terrorist organization. And besides that, he also made another very crucial point, which was unprecedented. As you may know, since 1984, Turkey is devastated by the terrorist attacks of a Kurdish organization called the PKK. The PKK is considered as a terrorist organization by the United States, by the European Union, and by the State of Israel. Okay, so we have a consensus that this is a terrorist organization. But Mr. Erdogan, during his speech, he said that the ones who are feeding, who are supporting the PKK are Israel. They are providing and sponsoring terrorism with their money, and they are providing them ammunition. For God's sake, I mean, where is the evidence? I mean, for the first time ever, I hear such accusations. And just think out loud, please. Think that you are in the same rally like an ordinary Turkish citizen. And when you are hearing these words from your president, of course, you're going to buy it, right? Because it's your president. And if your president is saying that these people, the Israelis, are behind the PKK, so each time when there will be a PKK attack against Turkish civilians or against the Turkish army, automatically these people in the very near future will blame Israel. Okay, so this is very important, and this is something very critical. Besides that, he went even further, and he underlined his desire to launch a new judicial law against the Israeli government. He said that soon the Turkish government's justice ministry will prepare the necessary paperwork to launch a judicial war against the state of Israel, most probably in The Hague, in the Netherlands. So unfortunately, you know, you may not support us, but for God's sake, even please don't sue us, because at the end of the day, you are considered as a part of the Western alliance, and we all suffer from terrorism. Also, Turkey suffers from terrorism. And also Israel suffers from terrorism. But when we are looking at the Turkish government's current attitude, it's really incredible, because on the 7th of October, when the Israeli civilians were butchered in their homes, they were raped, they were kidnapped, they were killed in an unacceptable manner, the Turkish president on the same date didn't deliver any statement. The day after, he called all of the sides, to calm down the situation. He always tried to make a balanced statement, as if Israel initiated this war, and later, when Israel began to retaliate, so he remained silent. During his silence, another incredible thing happened in Turkey. The Turkish opposition parties, including the most secular and socialist left-wing parties, they adopted a super pro-Hamas attitude and turned Erdogan into the most pro-Israeli politician in the Turkish political spectrum. And in March 2024, next year, Turkey is heading to another important elections of the municipal elections, and Mr. Erdogan needs Istanbul and Ankara, because both Istanbul and Ankara are considered as very important sources for income. Okay, when you control these municipalities, you can send lots of money to your Islamic foundations as if you are collaborating with these foundations. Okay, so this is very crucial for him. He needs Istanbul and Ankara. Therefore, he decided to adopt a harsher stance against the state of Israel, and he eliminated all of his opposition parties by adopting a blunt, a very stronger sense of support to the Palestinian cause. And he said, I'm not only for the Palestinian cause, but I'm also for Hamas. So this is crucial because it is something really unprecedented. I would like to remind you that Turkey still needs to get from the US the F-16s because of the fact that the Turks bought the S-400 anti-ballistic missile systems from Russia. They were imposed a series of sanctions which are called CAATSA, C-A-A-T-S-A. And since then, in order to get any kind of ammunition or US-made weaponry, they need the Congress's approval. And most likely, now the Congress, the Congress attached that particular deal to Sweden's accession to NATO. Recently, the Turkish parliament ratified this, but there is only one bureaucratic obstacle left, but soon Sweden will be admitted to NATO. And now I assume that because of this really unbelievable support to Hamas, I assume that the Turkish administration may face new sanctions from the US. Recently, 2 days ago, a very significant US think tank called FDD, the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, they organized an event, and there they openly accused Turkey of supporting Hamas. And therefore, they penned a petition that was sent to the American senators and also to the House of Representatives to take bold action against Turkey. So now, before I will conclude my words, I would also like to give you some personal background about myself. I was born and raised in Turkey, and Turkish is my mother tongue, and I really love Turkey. And seeing the country that I was born in this kind of a situation, it really gives me a huge pain. I'm seeing, unfortunately, a very harsh anti-Semitism, and unfortunately, also I'm seeing very unacceptable pictures in the internet, like in this building, in this store, the Jews are not allowed, or I'm not accepting Israeli passengers in my taxi, and these kind of pictures are circulating. Only it was yesterday in the city of Izmir, a synagogue called Etz Chaim was vandalized, and of course the Israeli flags became the new carpets in the Istanbul Bazaar, which is very similar to Iran. By the way, I would like to provide you a very historical anecdote here. when the founder of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, regained the city of Smyrna in Greek, from the Greek army, the Turks who wanted to celebrate the conquest of the city, they put the Greek flag at the entrance of the Izmir government house. But what Mustafa Kemal did then, he said, even if this flag is the flag of our enemy, I'm not going to vote on it. Please put the flag aside because this flag is representing the honor of the other people. So he refused to go on the flag. And this particular story was taught in every single Turkish school textbook. That is how I know this story, because I was taught in a Turkish primary school. And now I'm seeing the same Turkish citizens who received the same education, but they are not hesitating, walk on the Israeli flag, and they are not acting like Atatürk. In other words, the current Turkish citizens, in my opinion, the vast majority of them, they left Atatürk's path. I'm opening here a parenthesis. I was only one sentence.
This will have to be the final.
Okay, final. Approximately 3 weeks ago, I was in Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan is also considered as a Turkic state. They speak Turkish. And there you can see the exact opposite. The people went to the Israeli embassy, they put roses, they brought toys, they wrote letters. It's something incredible. This is Turkey, this is Azerbaijan. Incredible. Thank you very much for having me. And
thank you. Actually, one of the Azeris who did that is, I think, with us tonight, Rafael. So it's an opportunity to say hello. How are you?
Hi, Rafael.
Shalom.
Always good to see you. So our next speaker comes from a country that's not discussed very often in the context of the conflict, but it is a very important country, if not for anything else, than for the fact that it has a population of over 1 billion people, and that it also faces the challenges of radical Islam. Shiven Nath is a graduate of Tel Aviv University and also of the Institute and the fellowship program that is hosting this event tonight, the Irwin Cotler fellowship program for democracy, justice, and human rights. And I think, Shiven, you are now in India, already back in India?
Yes, mostly, yes.
Perfect. So please share with us your thoughts on the official and public opinion on the war in India.
Shalom and namaskar to everyone. Looking towards India's current official position on the war, one is seeing a sharp shift in Indian foreign policy. India is moving towards a policy of siding with Israel. This can be accrued to kindred political ideologies between India and Israel. An upward trajectory in relations with Israel was made possible due to the presence of a Hindu nationalistic government in India. This was under the tutelage of Narendra Damodar Modi and the Bharatiya Janata Party. India, being one of the largest purchasers of Israeli defense-made equipment, further buttresses India's current official support to Israel. Although it has sent humanitarian aid to Gaza and supported a two-state solution, the Indian Foreign Ministry and the Foreign Secretary did state that. India's support is evidenced with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tweet stating that the people of India stand in solidarity with Israel in this difficult hour. Furthermore, India recently defending abstention during the UN General Assembly's vote on Gaza, India held her ground to incorporate the explicit condemnation of the barbaric and bestial attacks committed by Hamas. Despite a diplomatic strife with Canada, India backed Canada for condemning Hamas's terror. Israel has always extended support to India over the insurgency-wrecked region of Jammu and Kashmir. Also, Indian foreign policy makers do foresee that this was a bid by Hamas to play a role as a spoiler in this Israeli-Saudi peace deal. Moving on, I'm deeply afraid and deeply concerned because the Indian academia and the Indian academic circle will perhaps term me as a Zionist and an Israeli mouthpiece, which is deeply concerning. I am not afraid of my support to Israel. I will always stand by Israel. On a more mundane note, in a broader geopolitical context, I would like to cite the example of Turkey. Turkey has once again backstabbed, as it did with India over Kashmir. I'll draw the parallel in a few seconds, a parallel which is very similar to Erdogan backing and terming Israel as a war criminal recently. Let me remind you that it was both India and Israel who sent aid to Turkey during its devastating earthquake disaster. The mission which was sent by the Indian Air Force was termed as Operation Dost, which Dost translating directly to friend. It was a C-17 aircraft which landed in Turkey with supplies and medical equipment and officials from the Indian Armed Forces. This is clearly a backstabbing move on the part of Turkey. I will now look at the progressive left liberals in India. Progressive left liberals like Arundhati Roy have issued a solidarity statement for the Palestinians in Gaza. Such support is erroneous and unjust, as it is endorsing Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The Indian National Congress, which is an opposition political party in India today, supported and issued a similar statement for Palestinian statehood. But this is all attributed to its imprudent Nehruvian ideology, which believes in third world activism and staunch support for Palestinian statehood. Later, however, it did recant its statement and condemned the terror attacks. The Indian National Congress must update its outmoded standard of operating procedure and Israel policy. Looking at an Islamic parliamentarian, a Southern Owaisi belonging to the All India Majlisi Ittihadul Muslimin, he held a pro-Palestinian rally. Similar such rallies were held in Kerala, which is an Islamic majority state in India. Southern Owaisi in this rally spoke harshly against Israel. This once again is supporting attacks against innocent Israeli civilians, rape, killings of babies, kidnapping of women, children, and even Holocaust survivors, thus not taking into cognizance the barbarous attacks orchestrated by Hamas. The Indian left remains divided too, and has failed to recognize the existential peril that Israel faces in the region. Protests by students at Jawaharlal Nehru University and Delhi University, majority of them were Muslim, outside the Israeli embassy, is an attempt to emulate the protests in Great Britain. And they do not have adequate understanding about the conflict and the state of Israel and the state of the Jewish people. The progressive left liberals and the students protesting must understand that the existence of the Jewish state is justified, as it was a transfer from a previous sovereign, which was the British Empire. The Balfour Declaration is a document which justifies Israel's existence. Moreover, under international law, Israel has a right to defend itself, and Israel can claim prescription over Judea and Samaria. Hamas is using civilians as human shields and are not representing the Palestinian people. A Southern Owaisi this thought does not even pervade his thinking. Hamas uses hospitals, schools, mosques as military bases. All in all, the Indian left wants to counter the Israeli narrative and completely disregard it. The idea of never again must be ingrained in their memory, and that the Jewish state will always exist. I would like to sum up my arguments by saying that given India and Israel's victimhood from terror, India understands. The Indians understand. Moreover, the Hindus understand, as in the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, which is oft referred to as India's 9/11, both Hindus and Jews were targeted. These attacks were all aided and abetted by Pakistan. The terror group was Lashkar-e-Taiba, but this was all supported by Pakistan. And today, the rogue nation supports Hamas. There was a video floating around in social media that a Pakistani cricketer, Babar Azam, he openly supported the Palestinian cause and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, hailed it, in fact. It can be contended that this is a wake-up call for even Indian intelligence agencies, as there are innumerous Islamic extremist sleeper cells operating within India, and some are Iranian-backed too, which poses a great risk to India. the ideological alignment, regional alliances like the I2U2, and the robust military partnership with Israel reflects India's support to Israel and India's support to the Jewish people, as it did welcome the Jewish people many years back. It did give homage to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people did not face any persecution in India. I'd like to end my argument by saying that I stand with Israel unapologetically. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiven. This was very enlightening. We will have time for Q&A at the very end. And now our final speaker is Dr. Carl Yonker, who is the academic director of the Cotler Institute that is hosting this event, and also the project manager of the Center for Contemporary European, the Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry, which is co-hosting this event. So now Carl's presentation will be about the way the radical American right is treating and analyzing this war. And let me just tell you this: if you think that the American progressive left is kind of crazy, wait till you hear this. So Carl, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll keep my comments relatively brief so that we can get to question and answer and have time for that. So when we're talking about the American radical right, it's obviously a very big concept. It includes a lot of different groups and individuals, different ideologies, but there's a lot of overlap. But one thing can be said by and large when we're talking about the radical right, which can include white supremacists, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and others, was that they were overjoyed and welcomed what happened on October 7th, what Hamas did. This graph on the left, this little photo, basically summarizes the idea. It's from a neo-Nazi group in the United States called the Nationalist Social Club, mostly based in the East Coast. Here you have an SS soldier standing next to a jihadist with the hashtags "Death to Israel" ×1 struggle. And this is the essence of the message, that it is death to Israel, death to Jews, and that it's a shared struggle. It's a common struggle. And this is what was really seen, was that regardless of where messages were posted in different online forums, Telegram, 4chan, on their video platforms, wherever, you see this kind of confluence of hatred, this convergence of a shared hatred of Jews, and I mean that by Jews, not just Israeli Jews, but Jews in general. It was an exciting moment for them that all of a sudden there's a bunch of dead Jews, and that Hamas is continuing, at least for the neo-Nazis and other white supremacists, is continuing the work of Hitler. And they say these exact words. It's I'm not using those words to shock you. This is their narrative. So there's an alignment of hate based on anti-Semitism, a shared hatred of Jews, a shared hatred of Israel, that is bringing these two radical ideologies together. I want to focus on three aspects of how this hatred has manifested itself, kind of three main areas that it manifests itself in their online discourse. The first is propaganda, and it's propaganda in support of Hamas. Now, this can take several different shapes. One is mostly unoriginal, and that is simply taking Hamas propaganda that it publishes and republishing it themselves. And not only what Hamas is publishing, but other organizations in the so-called axis of resistance, which I spoke about a few weeks ago, which includes other kind of Iranian-backed organizations like Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and other Shia organizations based out of Iraq. And you see this kind of sharing and amplifying of the propaganda that they put out, not with any sort of translation or with any sort of context. It's sharing a video of, Hamas, killing and murdering innocent Israelis. It's there for the brutality and to inspire in terms of more violence. The second thing that you see is a combination or a blending of kind of right-wing symbolism and Nazi symbolism with Hamas and Islamist symbolism. One of the founders of an organization, a neo-Nazi organization called the Goyim Defense League, was seen on his live stream praising the Hamas attack, praising the fact that Jews were being murdered, and his background was the Al-Qaeda flag. And at the end of his little rant, he gave the Roman salute against the backdrop of the Al-Qaeda flag. There's also one of the more famous kind of memes or characters among the far right is a meme called Pepe the Frog. It's a green frog character that doesn't necessarily have any sort of radical connotations in and of itself. But in right-wing, far-right discourse, it's an important symbol. And here you saw kind of a blending of Pepe the Frog becoming a jihadist or a Hamas fighter, flying in on a paraglider, and taking the imagery of what happened during the Hamas attack and blending it with this far-right imagery. The third thing that happens in the propaganda is positive comparisons between what the Nazis did and what Hamas is doing. That it's a shared fight, that Hamas are allies in this fight against the Jews. And this propaganda ultimately leads to builds up to threats. This is kind of the second thing that has manifested itself, that you see neo-Nazi groups and white nationalists and others actively calling for the harm of Jews and calling for attacks against Jews, not just in Israel, but also around the world. And that's a second major component. Blending in with the propaganda is a second main kind of theme in the discourse, which is conspiracies. Now, the conspiracies advanced by these groups and individuals, some are rooted and have a history. When there was with the U.S. engagement and moving of aircraft carriers and aircraft groups into the Eastern Mediterranean, a few far-right activists were very keen to remember or to remind of the USS Liberty incident that happened in the past, in which Israel was alleged to have attacked a U.S. warship in the Mediterranean. And so there's a suggestion that Israel might be up to something again, kind of a new Liberty incident could be brewing. The conspiracies are outlandish. One is that they suggest that the whole operation is nothing more than what happened on October 7th was nothing more than a false flag operation by the Mossad that was intended to serve as and justify as a land grab to establish Greater Israel. The second one was that Israel knew of the attack in advance, but did nothing to stop it, so that it could now justify ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. The third one is that this is just yet another demonstration of the Zionist occupied government and how Israel and the Jews run the world and are just manipulating America and world leaders, and that somehow, because of all of this, Israel is going to come out on top and benefit somehow, economically, militarily, etc. And close in related with that is that there's a fear that, or suggestion that Israel is trying to launch World War III. So these are the conspiracies. And the last thing that I want to end with, just briefly, is to talk more about the internal discourse and what this means for America. Neo-Nazis and white nationalists, and also a segment of what is known as Christian nationalists, or you could even more generalize as America Firsters, really push an isolationist line. So they don't want any sort of foreign intervention. They don't want America to become involved in the Middle East, more involved in the Middle East. But how this manifests itself in the discourse is that it tries to paint American Jews as traitors. One of the most common or most popular white nationalists, Christian nationalists, is a guy named Nick Fuentes, who basically came out and called Jews, American Jews, for them to be deported, for them to be detained, and basically called them traitors and parasites, alleging that they're warmongers and trying to get America involved in a war that it shouldn't be involved in. And with that, I'll close.
Thank you. You know, Carl, I'm not feeling much better than I did an hour ago. In that sense, this seminar was not helpful.
Sorry to be depressing.
No, all of you were kind of. Maybe Shiven was sort of less depressed, but that's because of his optimism, I think, and some of the data. No, but thank you all. These were fascinating presentations. And I suggest now we do the following. We allow, because of time constraints, we allow one question for each of the participants. Quick questions, concise answers. Carl, I suggest you take command from here and you choose the questions for, unless people want to also like ask them verbally rather than writing. Yeah. So do we have questions?
There were a few. Let's see.
There were many for Noah, but just I think Noah, I think you saw all the questions that were addressed to you, and I think they sort of can be answered in one maybe extended answer. So would you like to address them?
Yeah, sure. A couple of the questions were sort of, can we take the BBC to court? It's been looked into by people such as the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism and their podcast. But the short answer is it's very difficult because in this country we have a freedom of speech, and the BBC can lean on and defend that, well, using that defense. Like I said, it is illegal to support Hamas in this country. However, to support Palestine, that is not illegal. And others will argue that the BBC are doing neither. So it's a very difficult argument. In the court of public opinion, it's completely different. And the BBC will take a hit for this with their taxpayer, with their license fee money going down the drain, I should imagine, when it comes to renewal. But another question, did I not know what I was signing up for when I worked for the BBC? Well, yes, obviously. I know their stance on Israel. That's not a secret. However, I went in as a football and sport reporter. I had very little to do with the political side of the BBC until very recently. It was always something that bothered me. Perhaps, I don't know, selfishly, I chose to not act on it or react on it. But there's nothing too late in life. It's never too late to do the right thing in life. And I'm glad that I left when I did. And so I think they were the sort of questions. Oh, and the question about John Simpson, quite using the word terrorist does take sides. And are the BBC afraid of the Arab world? I don't know. I suppose there's an argument for that. However, like I said in my talk, this is we've thankfully got a government who support the BBC and who will protect the BBC. There have been questions on the government, why aren't they instructing instead of advising? However, their protection probably does just that, protects them from the Arab world. So, or the Arab hate. Also, the BBC are used to getting hate left, right, and centre. You know, as journalists, we all are. We have a thick skin, so I don't suppose that's why they aren't using the correct terminology. Like I said, it's either unconscious anti-Semitism or conscious anti-Semitism.
Excellent, thank you. I'll just add one comment to yours, Noah. That is that the country that corrupted world football is also the one that supports Hamas, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So, just
well,
I don't think football is an entirely different story here. It's the same corruption and immorality.
Just to add to that very, very briefly, on Sky Sports, when it pans to any game, you have advertisements from Emirates, from Dubai Airways, Qatar Airways, and then they go and pan to a story about Israel. So there is no shame with these broadcasters, especially those who rely on their commercial entities for revenue and profit. But that's the world we live in, unfortunately. That's the media in this country.
Great. Carl, do we have questions for Chai about Turkey? I thought there were
I haven't seen a question about Turkey or a question about India.
So I have one for Chai, if he's still with us. I guess
of course I'm with you.
I know it's a question a lot of people are asking, which is like, is there a real Erdogan? Does this person actually exist as like an entity in the world? And
Okay.
if there is, then who is the real one?
Okay, first of all, I can tell you that I'm tagging him like a chameleon, that he is changing his state, like how he looks, and he's behaving according to the circumstances. But if I need to answer your question, he's an Islamist, and unfortunately, he was very much influenced by the anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist schools in Turkey. He is the student of Necmettin Erbakan, the former Turkish prime minister, whose nickname is Mujahid. I assume that you understand what is Mujahid is, a warrior for Islam. And according to some witnesses, when he was a very young man, Erdogan penned a theater play called Mas Kom Yah. Mas is for the Freemasons, Kom is for the communists, and Yah for the Yahudi, for the Jews. According to these three entities, the Freemasons, communists, and the Jews, they are the ones who are ruling the world. So when such a person is becoming first Turkey's prime minister and then Turkey's almighty president with all of these jurisdictional powers, you're seeing that there is a steady deterioration in the relations with Israel. So you understand that he is doing this intentionally, but you may ask then, why is he also trying to restore the relations and trying to repair it, right? To mend fences because of the fragile Turkish economy, because he is taking he's under pressure from his investors, especially from the Gulf. For instance, this latest normalization with Israel was the product of the Turkey's normalization with the Emiratis and the Saudis. Okay, so they invested so much hot money in Turkey, so they bought the tendency of the Turkish foreign policy. That is why. So, in a nutshell, Erdogan is what you're seeing today. This is real Erdogan, but the good thing about Erdogan that tomorrow, maybe this tomorrow will be in 3 years, he is capable of doing a U-turn, and he will not be held accountable, and nobody can blame him because he is almighty. So this is a good thing about Erdogan.
Great. Shiven, I think you saw the two questions addressed to you.
Yes. So surprisingly enough, and this is playing out so perfectly, let me put it this way. Indian Muslims have been overwhelmingly in support of the Palestinian cause. They have rose up in support. But, I blame parliamentarians like Asauddin Owaisi for this. They use this as a gambit, as a political gambit. This is purely vote bank politics at play in a larger schematic of things in the Indian political diaspora. But certain Hindus like Arundhati Roy is of course a Hindu, has spoken out for the Palestinian cause. Even Barkha Dutt, a notable journalist who's currently in Israel right now, has spoken out. But mostly, I am seeing an overwhelmingly Muslim support towards the Palestinian cause, which is a little concerning for us Indians and Hindus as well. It's a matter of concern. So, moving on to the second question, what has been the impact of India's large and influential Indian diaspora? So, mostly, I do not really understand your question, but there is a sizable Indian Jewish population in Israel currently. And
I think, Shiven, I think the question was about Indians in Britain, for example.
Indians in Britain. But
United States. One of them is kind of famous, though.
Yeah, Indians in the United Kingdom have also risen in support. They have gone to these protests, and some of them are Hindu, but they come under the progressive left liberal tribe, if I were to put it that way. They do not understand the conflict in the larger scheme. They do not understand what Israel is all about. They're denouncing, like Professor Shavit said, they're denouncing Western liberalism. They're just denouncing Western liberalism.
But Shiven, you'd agree with me that there is at least one British Indian who is not on the progressive left.
Yes.
we know who that. Yes. Great. Carl, thank you, Shiven. That was great. Carl, there were a few questions addressed to you. So
Yeah. So 1 second. 1 second. Sorry.
You can pick one or two. I mean, I don't think we can.
No, someone has been drawing on the screen, and I just removed them. So two of the questions kind of dealt with more of the, I guess, what do the far right and far left share in common? And I want to put the far left and the left in its own category, because how they've responded on the far left is something completely different. I don't want to reduce it just to anti-Semitism. There's a lot that gets them to that point. On the far right, though, for neo-Nazis and for white nationalists, it's anti-Semitism. It's the lowest common denominator. It's not that they have any sort of love for Islam or for religion. In the next breath, you'll see debates talking about how, well, wait a second, this could spark another refugee crisis that brings Muslims to Europe or to the United States, which is something that we don't want. So there's a racial aspect to that. Regarding kind of what I see as kind of the more worrying trend is the isolationist one, or this America First trend, because there you see an idea that's not necessarily racial, but it's one that has become more mainstream. And it's the one that's seeping into the discourse of the Republican Party and affecting, the foreign policy discourse in the United States, not only regarding Israel, but regarding Ukraine and America's broader role in the world. And so that, it's much easier to put the Nazis and the white nationalists off to the side or dismiss them to a certain degree. The real challenge is going to be dealing with this kind of isolationist push.
Good. So I think this will be a good time to conclude. I thank Dr. Yonker for organizing this event so superbly, and thank you to the Irwin Cotler Fellows who joined us tonight. We'll see you on Sunday morning. To the prospective participants in my lecture series on the clash and meeting of civilizations, I'm going to see you next Tuesday. Looking forward to that, and to all of you who participated again in such impressive numbers, thank you very much. It's very good to see you in such difficult times, to see you all together, and we'll meet in our next seminar at some point in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Thank you.